The microphones?
Yeah, because
Okay.
Bună seara sau bună ziua, că suntem în acea perioadă a anului când nu mai știm dacă a început seara sau încă e zi. Sunt Cătălin de Constantin, coordonatorul acestor conferințe. Am o misiune ușoară pentru că e scurtă. Un coordonator trebuie să dispară repede și să lase loc conferențiarului. Și ușoară pentru că spun în fiecare seară de joi același lucru. Conferențiarul are o carieră întreagă de cercetare, de citit și consumă o oră. Eu vă consum 5 minute, atât. Vreau în primul rând să vă anunț așa negustorește subiectele de joile următoare, în ideea că vă conving să ajungeți. Data viitoare ne vom întâlni cu criticul de teatru Cristina Rușiețchi și cu invitații ei, regizorul piesei Medea's Boys și actorii din distribuția piesei. Teatrul și al treilea gen se cheamă această conferință. Întotdeauna atelierele, conferințele legate de teatru au ieșit foarte bine, așa că vă aștept. Facem o pauză de Paști, apoi ne vom întâlni cu câteva subiecte legate de a români și cu o tematică legată, tot un invitat, o invitată de această dată din Grecia, legată de restaurare și de arta bizantină. Dar gata cu promoul, sunteți aici nu pentru mine, ci pentru domnul Mustafa Diktaș, care vine de la Istanbul, e istoric și antropolog. A susținut un doctorat pe tema despre care ne va vorbi în această seară, pelerinaje suprapuse în Insula Prinților la Biserica Sfântului Gheorghe, un subiect foarte interesant pentru că ne poartă într-un loc foarte frumos și suprapune nu confesiuni, ci de-a dreptul culte diferite. Thank you for being here. You have almost an hour to tell us your beautiful research story.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
So these microphones work?
Yes.
Really? Okay. Okay, so sunt foarte fericit că sunt aici. True? Correct? Okay, perfect. Again. So I started coming to Romania years ago, 4 years ago or something like this, as a pilgrim. Like I was taking a flight from Istanbul, first to Bucharest, and then transferring to Iași to participate the pilgrimage of Aya Paraschiva. So waiting like hours, like sometimes 7 or 10 hours in the line with all these devout pilgrims coming from the different and remote villages of Romania. All these ritual dramas and everything was so fascinating for me. So, but I could never imagine at that time that one day I would be giving a presentation about the pilgrimages in Romania, which is full of small and big scale pilgrimages. So thanks for having invited me here, Cătălin. Thank you very much. So the title of my presentation, as you see, Aya Yorgi of Büyükada. Are you sure that they work? Because I can't hear my voice. Okay. Okay. So, Aya Yorgi of Büyükada, a shared pilgrimage site in modern Turkey. In this presentation, I will be touching the topics like the topography of the site, I mean the landscape, which is an important, which has an important role in the sacrality and the corporality of the pilgrimage and the sanctuary. And then I'll give some brief information about the pilgrims, the analysis of the pilgrimage, and then contested arenas. And I will conclude my speech with a short video. I hope you will enjoy and you won't get bored. Yes, the sanctuary, Büyükada, Aya Yorgi, is situated on an island, the biggest island of the Adalar chain in Istanbul, which is called Büyükada, and it can be reached from different ferry stations from Istanbul. Islands, some certain landscapes have always figured in humanity's dreams of the ideal world, and islands as landscapes have always presented as the localities of desires and the platforms of paradise, and even sites for the shadowy dimensions of human history because of their marginal, strict geographical margins and controlled land use and also restriction of access. They have served as places for treaty signings, liminal places for treaty signings, for prisons, for madhouses, and even religious buildings, and even pilgrimages in our case. And Büyükada, the Principe, carries most of these attributions of islands as landscape, and similarly it was a land for exile during the Byzantine era for the unwanted princes that they were exiled to Büyükada. And even recently, not recently, but in the Republican period in 1930s, it hosted Leon Trotsky, who was escaping from the hostility of Stalin. So Leon Trotsky also stayed in the island for 4 years or something. And concerning the shadowy dimensions, and many of the monasteries on the island, including the Aya Yorgi monastery, served as a madhouse for the mentally sick people for long years. But Büyükada now, with its mesmerizing beauty and green nature and a spiritual aura, it provides a sort of serenity and peace for the tourists and pilgrims. Although it's a part of Istanbul, an ilçe and a district of Istanbul, it still keeps its marginal space and liminal and marginal and isolated space because no motor vehicles, cars are allowed in the island, so the only means of transportation is the horse carriages, the phaetons, and even you can still feel yourself that you are traveling back in time when you are walking in the streets of Büyükada. And unlike Istanbul, it still cherishes its this multilinguistic and multicultural richness still. Yes, we talked about the importance of the islands and the Hacettepe, the hill where the sanctuary is situated. It gives us the impression of bringing the waters to the skies, like in an attempt to reach the sky. It evokes the term axis mundi by Mircea Eliade, coined by Mircea Eliade. Am I pronouncing correctly? Okay, so it's a sort of a homage to Mircea Eliade then today. It's like a cosmic mountain. It looks, because with its 202 meters of altitude, it looks like a cosmic mountain which communicates between two modes of being, sacred and profound, heaven and the earth. And the landscape of the island is emphasized by the pilgrims, either in my physical ethnographic field work for 4 years, but also I carried out digital ethnography on the Instagram space. So the island is frequently visited by tourists and also by pilgrims, and it's posted on Instagram sphere quite a lot. So with these pictures, you can see the hashtags like happiness, peace, serenity, blue, and nice and beautiful. It's very obvious that the visitors are touched and moved by the spiritual aura of the space as well. Aya Yorgi Kudunas is the name of the church. It means the Aya Yorgi, Sfântul Gheorghe of the bells. Kudunas in Greek means the bells. So the official history of the church is a bit obscure and dark. It's always challenges with the legends. But according to the archives of Patriarchy, the Fener Patriarchy, there used to be a monastery which was constructed in the beginning of 10th century by Nikephoros Phokas, during the reign of Nikephoros Phokas. But during the plunders of the Latin invasion in 1203, the whole island was plundered by the Crusaders, and the monks of the monastery buried the holy icon with the holy relics and everything, just to avoid its desacralization and the robbing. After long years of this tragic event, one day, according to the legend now, one day a shepherd who was gazing his flock on the hills of the island falls asleep, and in his dream, Aya Yorgi, Sfântul Gheorghe, appears, saying that he should get up and then climb up the hill, and he listening to the noise, the sound of the bells, so that he would find his buried holy icon. And he didn't take it serious in the beginning, and after a series of dreams in row, he took it seriously. He climbed up the hill barefoot, and then he listened to the sounds of the bells, these bells, like this, and he just excavated the earth, and he miraculously found the holy icon. And then they reconstructed the monastery there because they found its original place. But this miraculous discovery by shepherds is not only bound to Aya Yorgi case. Victor Turner, who is a sort of a god, a father in pilgrimage studies, in his book Image and Pilgrimage in Christian Culture, he talks about a huge body of legends and myths about holy discoveries, especially in the 9th and the 10th century, by the shepherds and farmers, like a big body of legends, but with the uniform structures, like a shepherd finds an holy relic or holy icon with the help of bedazzling lights or visions or strange noises, like Notre Dame de Guadalupe in Castilla. So that was also another example. But the legend aside, according to the archives, the monastery, which is visited now, which can be seen now, was constructed in the 17th century during the reign of Sultan Murad IV. And the new church, which is visited in the modern times, was constructed in 1906 and opened to worship. So it's a touristic place, as I said, also a pilgrimage site, but also visited daily by the people, and it's frequently posted on Instagram as well. So I just wanted to see how the people see this site. I counted like 14,000 pictures with the hashtag of the Aya Yorgi Church and Aya Yorgi Kilisesi, but some of them have, positive perceptions, and some of them have negative perceptions in it. So I just divided into two, and I just want to share a couple of them with you. And these 3 pictures, these girls, they say that they have been coming to the island since they were kids. But by the way, they are all Muslims, the ones who are posting these pictures. And they find peace and serenity here. And this guy says, love your enemies, the verse from the Bible. And this girl says, we have respect for all religions. So this is something very positive, like they convey a positive message. But we have also posts with negative attitudes as well. But this guy, bunu buraya kim yaptı? We have a Turkish listener here, so you would understand. So who the hell constructed this here? So he was sort of in a way aggressive. He was not happy with the presence of the church there. And then, but the strangest thing is the comments below. He said, why didn't you go and say salam alaikum? Why didn't you go and say salam? It's also another threatening, an aggressive voice. There's a second picture. The boy is okay. I mean, he's very naive and innocent. He said, I came to Aya Yorgi and I prayed. But in the comments below, they said, you look so ugly and you look as if you did exorcism in the field. So you see. And the third one is just a picture from inside of the church, but below there is the lyrics of this famous song, Take Me to the Church by Hosea, which talks about the hypocritical attitude of the church towards homosexuals. Like, take me to the church, I'll worship like a dog at the shrine of your lies, I'll tell you my sins and you can sharpen your knife, offer me that deathless death, good God, let me give you my life. The Saint George of Büyükada, but the name Saint George, the hagiography of the Saint George is neither the hagiography of the saint, like this internationally acclaimed hagiography, his martyrdom or his story when he was slaying the dragon is not known by the modern pilgrims or modern tourists as well. So it's just a simple name for the church, for a church, and they have almost no information about the hagiography of the saint, but they have their own stories. Like the first one is the miraculous discovery of the church by the shepherd. It was what they are telling me whenever I ask about the saint. And the second one is a bit more recent, because in 1955, in 6th and 7th of September, there happened to be a big pogrom against the Greek population in Turkey, and that 2 nights, like the night of 6th of April and 7, I mean, most of the houses of the Greeks were plundered and vandalized, and even in Istanbul, some parts of Istanbul, and also in Büyükada. And this, according to the old generation that I interviewed, they said that now the legend comes. They say that they were this crazy mob, vandalized the island, and they started to march towards the hill to set fire to the church. But all of a sudden, a chevalier appeared, with the bedazzling light and the neighing of a horse, the sound of a neighing horse, and that the rocks started to fall down from the sky, and miraculously the church, the monastery, was saved from the vandalization. But we say, yes, a shared pilgrimage. It's a pilgrimage, a shared between Christians and Muslims. But how did this shared pilgrimage start? This was my main question from the beginning. How and why and how? So according to the people that I interviewed in Athens, the old generation, because I went to Athens to meet the old generation people just to see why and how it started, they told me that the shared participation of Muslims into the pilgrimage day started with daily votive visits to the ayazma of the church, due to the miraculous powers of the water. And water is a very important element in the popularization of the church. And these votive visits were mostly paid by mothers and their daughters, and assisted by their Christian neighbors. And they were just climbing up the hill barefoot and just asking the priest to recite prayer on them, and the single girls were believed to see their future husbands on the surface of the well. But then the thing started after 1960s in a way, and the Greeks gradually abandoned the island, and they moved to Athens and the different cities in Europe, and then but the pilgrimage never disappeared. Towards the 80s and 90s, 1980s and 90s, the morphology of the pilgrimage started to transform, and secular women from secular neighborhoods of Istanbul started to replace the former Greek pilgrims. So that was a picture taken in the beginning of 20th century, like I think beginning of 1900s, and this is the new one last year. So we said it started with votive visit by women, mothers and their daughters. So why women more than men? This was also a very curious question to be asked, especially in the Islamic territories, like in the Islamic world. I mean, Fatima Mernissi from Morocco, a feminist scholar, an anthropologist, she claims that the shrine visits provide opportunities for women to improve their power position and to change cultural gender inequalities. Because in Islam, the doors of the mosques are not fully open to the women, because they are firstly excluded, from this Orthodox religious prayers, like funeral prayers or Friday prayers, and they have to be. And the attires as well, they have to be careful with what they are wearing, the headscarf, the necessity of headscarf, and even the entrance sometimes in the churches. I mean, the woman cannot enter from the same door with the woman, not everywhere, but there are some cases. So these women, who is excluded from the Orthodox religion, they found their other places to express their power and to cope with this gender inequalities, and the shrine visits is just a part of it. And Serret, Gamzo, and Tepper, these feminist scholars who carried out studies in the Middle East and the Mediterranean basin, they also say that on the northern coast of Mediterranean, women's vows and pilgrimages are also closely related to health issues and integral part of women's domestic duties, like going to the shrines, asking for help, for cure or something for the family, is a part of their domestic duties, like cooking or cleaning up the house. So that's why they say. And the pilgrimage to shrines function as centers for health maintenance, cure for infertility, marriage negotiations, and sexual issues. We said Muslim and Christians, but who are these Muslims and Christians? Because such a country like Turkey, where different levels or shades of religiosities are experienced, we have not only one typical kind of Islam or Christianity. I mean, there are different layers and shades. So the Muslims can be divided into three parts, but seculars, mostly seculars, overwhelming majority of the Muslim pilgrims are secular, with laik, secular Muslims, and Alawis, the followers of Hazreti Ali, who's the grandson of Muhammad, and Sunni, the people with women with headscarves, we say, but they're in minority in the pilgrimage. Yes, and for these secular people, Islamic Sharia, Islamic law is something like a nightmare. Because in secularity, it's a very controversial issue in the countries like Turkey, Tunisia, and sometimes in Lebanon as well. So these women, they accept that they are Muslim by origin, by ethnicity, by history, or whatever, but they just reject to follow the principles of the religion because it's too much for them in a way, and they reject all the clergy, they don't respect any clergy, and they find other ways to express their spiritualities. And the only way for these women to embrace modernity is through rational thinking, modern life, and gender equalities, freedom of expression in Western framework. They sort of spruce up in the mirror of the West, and the testimonies from the field also supports this idea, because a woman at the age of 57 that I interviewed, she said, "Let me tell you something, my boy is me, boy," because he was talking, okay. "I'm a secular woman, and I personally don't feel comfortable in a mosque. The sheikhs and the others poke their noses in the length of my skirt and visible hair. By the way, thank God, alhamdulillah, I'm a Muslim, but I feel more peaceful in a church. I can pray in my own language, and no one cares if I wear a headscarf or not." And another one, "I have faith in religion, Islam. After all, I ask things from Allah, so it's not important to be in the church or in the mosque. I fancy Büyükada. I like the elitist air of the islands. And similarly, I feel more comfortable at Aya Yorgi than Ulu Mosque, for example, as a young girl at the age of 29. And they don't vote for the parties with Islamic agendas, in a way. In 2017, the main opposition party leader, he started a protest march from Ankara to Istanbul upon the arrestment of Enis Berberoğlu, the journalist. He was not only arrested but put into jail, sentenced to jail for 25 years. And this rally started. It was 450 kilometers between Istanbul and Ankara, and millions of people participated this protest march, and millions of others supported on their social media accounts. And with the hashtags like justice, equality, and freedom. When I was on the island on that summer, in an ordinary day, I came across with this paper, it was also stick to one of the trees of the church, like özgürlük, adalet, eşitlik. So Aya Yorgi was sort of works as a complaint mechanism for the secular women when they feel trapped and when they feel that there's no one to complain. And Christians, Armenians, of course, the local Armenians from Istanbul, and the Rums, the Greeks, and Syriacs. But there's more interesting is the new participants, new Christian participants. Moldovians, after the fall of Soviet Union, Georgians, they started to come to Istanbul to work in domestic service in a way, and lately Ethiopians, they're very popular in Lebanon, but in Lebanon and in Israel and Palestine, but now they are visible in Istanbul as well, and also Iraqi Assyrians. After the war of Iraq, they're waiting for visas to go to Australia, and they're sort of looking for residency in Istanbul for a couple of years. And the Aya Yorgi pilgrimage sort of provides a platform for these domestic workers in their to express their spiritualities and religions in a transnational process away from their home, in a home country. They just sort of find a significant time and space to express their religiosities, and they sort of socialize among each other. And the Aya Yorgi, Sfântul Gheorghe, St. George, is very familiar to them because he's mostly patron saint of their countries. And they ask for things. The testimonies in the field is also very interesting. In Moldova, we don't tie threads on the trees. I recited prayers dedicated to St. George silently during this hard walk. What she said was really touching. I purify myself from the filth of the Turkish houses that I clean. Yeah, it's sort of when they feel, trapped in insurmountable problems of the dislocation of the migration, they just come to Aya Yorgi to express themselves. And another one, my son is in jail in Tbilisi. They claim that he was arrested from the crime of drug dealing. I don't know. I don't want to believe in it. I ask Aya Yorgi to bring him back to me. And this one was from an Iraqi Assyria. We applied for our Australian visa 2 years ago and we are still waiting. I begged my Georgos to speed up our visa process, therefore I made Nadir. Wow. I walked up the slope barefoot. We have such a tradition in Iraq too. So the pilgrimage, let's continue with the pilgrimage. What happens? The pilgrimage is not only bound to only 2 days, but the biggest one is the 23rd of April, the feast day of the saint. But the people whose wishes are granted, they come to the church again after 6 months on the day of Ayatekla, 24th of September, to express their gratitude to the saint and the church. But on the 23rd of April, like 70,000 people, pilgrims, just accumulate, just the flood in the island. It's such a big pilgrimage, and it's considered now to be one of the biggest pilgrimages in the world as well. I'll be a little bit conceptual here. So Victor Turner is the prominent figure in pilgrimage studies. He offers sort of the three-staged pilgrimage process: preliminal, liminal, and post-liminal. So in the preliminal process is separation. You separate, it's like initiation. You separate from your previous self, and in the liminal stage, you are in transition, neither here or there. And then post-liminal stage, you reach your goal, and then when you finish, you integrate into society with the new self. And the ultimate goal of the pilgrim should be communitas, they say. And what is communitas? To be a little bit short, it's a feeling of equal part of humanity, seeing mankind as homogeneous and unstructured, like the traditional conventions and structures are suspended, comradeship and unity free from social structures. So in the preliminal stage, it's basically about preparation for this transition, and it's basically on reaching the site, because it's not easy. They have to take the boats from different parts of Istanbul. They first come to the island, and then there's another 4 kilometers of way to be walked or to be taken. And mostly they take horse carriages, and they reach to a certain point, which is to be walked. Like this is where they reach the island, and then they take this road with the horse carriages, and they reach to a certain circus called Luna Park, and from there they have to walk up. So it's a very challenging road, and it's a real preliminary stage. And also they have to prepare with themselves with the votive offerings and pilgrimages. They provides a rich study of material and spiritual consumption, because the experiential character of the pilgrimage creates a demand for images and objects to embody the sensations and the emotions that the pilgrimage creates. So I divided the votive offerings into 2 parts. The first, votive donations, like money you give to the church. Olive oil, if your wishes are granted, you just bring olive oil to the church for the candles. And sugar cubes and candies, which is a very Muslim tradition. It's not a Christian thing. And also votive objects, they can only, it's a bit complicated, but they can only be divided into two parts. The one is accepted by the church, the official ones, and the not accepted, the vernacular ones. So accepted by the church are afieromatas. You must be familiar with it, like the thin silver sheets embossed with the part of the body that you are looking to be cured. And also these tiny votive bells. These bells is a sort of a reference to the miraculous discovery of the holy icons, because the shepherd heard the sounds of the bells. And these bells are given now in the church when you visit the church as a sort of a baraka, a grace. So if your wishes are granted, you're supposed to bring those bells back. So these are the bells, this type of small bells. It's sort of a dual contract between God and you. If you accept my wishes, I'll bring it back. And Afieromata tradition has led to an invention of a new votive commodity called dilekliks. They are made from cheap metals, which has the shape of the physical shape of their wishes. Like this, if you want a house, you are supposed to, instead of carving them on the papers or asking from God, you just keep it with you. You pray, and it's a vernacular thing. And the car, and there are hundreds of different shapes of dilekliks. And Alan, this one is very important, the strings. This is the most prominent votive object which popularized the pilgrimage. And the strings, the threads, they have a symbolic meaning, because they believe that this is from Aya Yorgi, for example, if you believe that your faith, kader in Turkish, is blocked, it's like a string. While undoing it, like a ritual drama, you can undo this blockage. So, but it wasn't a part of Aya Yorgi pilgrimage until 1990s. So after this internal migration start from inside of Anatolia to Istanbul, people brought their, the shrine practices to Istanbul, and they just embedded into Aya Yorgi pilgrimage as well. But on Instagram, you can see very beautiful artistic pictures about the pictures that the pilgrims posted. It's very artistic and very nice pictures. And another one is multicolored candles. So yes, candles is always a part of Christian faith, very important part of Christian faith. But here, the color symbolism is added. Like, for example, if you want a car, you have to light a purple one. And if you want peace, you are supposed to light a green one, sort of a color symbolism. And it's very popular among the pilgrims, like an invention of a new tradition. So we finish the preliminary stage and we go to the liminal stage now. So when they reach the circus, there is 900 meters of very steep path that should be walked. There is no other way to reach no cable cars or nothing. They have to walk. Everybody should walk. It's the shepherd's path, like in the tradition where shepherd climbed up in order to find the holy icon. And they believe that there's an invisible line in the very beginning of the path, and after they pass it, they have to keep quiet, and then they have to keep silent and respect and start to recite prayers and climb and unreel the threads like this. And looking back is strictly forbidden, because this symbolic prohibition not to look back is a sort of like a radical cut between your past identity when you are trying to reach a new identity, sort of this symbolic meaning. And it's also frequently featured in Mesopotamian and mythologies, and also in the Old Testament. For example, in Genesis 19, then the Lord rained down fire and burning sulfur from the sky on Sodom and Gomorrah. He utterly destroyed them, along with the other cities and the villages of the plain, wiping out all the people and every bit of vegetation. But Lot's wife, can you see it? Okay, looked back, and he was following him, and she turned into a pillar of salt. Yes, you know it. Yes, and then they started to walk the steep path. mostly with their shoes, but some crazy pilgrims, they sort of, yes, with barefoot, even in the rainy weather. They unreel. They start to unreel the threads while reading prayers silently, and in the end of the day, they unintentionally sort of interwoe a carpet. So they knit a carpet in a way on the slope, and it's really amazing in the end of the day to see such a view. And on the way, they attach voodoo dolls and they write their prayers on the papers and they stick them on the benches of the trees. And in the church, and then they reach the church, they wait for a couple of hours, sometimes like 1 hour, 2 hours is too long, and under the surveillance of the police sometimes. And they enter the church, light the candles. The Christians, they cross themselves, kneel in front of the icons, and the Muslims, they recite prayers from Quran. You can see from their lips that they are reading out something in Arabic or something. And they sort of half circumambulate in the church, and the best part, they write their wishes on a piece of papers like this. This is also from Aya Yorgi, and then they put it in this wish box. So you have in Romania there's a similar tradition, but it's different. In Romania, you write your name and properly. You give it to the priest. You give a little bit of money, and then he reads your prayers and I think recite prayers on you. But here it's a bit different. We will see. They write their prayers, but any curious person would be interested. What are they asking for? It's sort of made of glass, and you try to read what he asked for. And if you are a researcher, your curiosity doubles in a way. And then I asked the priests many times just to reach this huge corpus of prayers, but they rejected. And because I said, you are going to burn all these things in the end, but just give it to me. And so I will be working on it. They didn't. But it was not impossible to reach those prayers because some really devout ones, they fold the prayers and then they tuck them into the hollows of the church under the pews and up behind the icons just to make their prayers to be more durable and this between God and them. So I collected 50 papers and I applied a content study on those papers. So under 3 different headings, like direction, to whom the prayers are addressed, need, the reasons they pray, and style and form of the prayers. So let's start with the directions to whom the prayers are addressed. Like out of 50 prayers, 17 addresses directly to God, Allah, Muslim God, let's say, Allah'ım, Ya Rabbim, Yaratıcı or Tanrım. 3 of them to Aya Yorgi St. George, and the 30 is not specified to whom they address. Let's see some examples. Allah'ım, ordain us health, happiness and peace. Let me enter a good university and a good department. Ordain us a long life to all my beloved ones. Aziz Yorgi, Aya Yorgi, let me come here again with good news next year. Give a miraculous healing and mental health to my daughter Daphne, money and happiness, luck, wealth and success. I want to be proud of her. Lucky marriage and good fortune, like without an addressee. And need, why? What do they ask for? This is the chart. So the most frequent need is money, like 40% of the prayer, they ask for money. And second one, marriage. 24%, and then house, car, paying off the debts, etc., etc. So let's have a look at how they ask. So Allah'ım, give me money, health and peace, a long life without debts and overweight. Or money, happiness to all my family members. Allah'ım, you give me my sister E and Suzanne a clean and well-behaved husband. Give us a healthy life and a prosperous household. Let us be peaceful, let us buy a car, let my marriage be good and let it happen quickly. Let my music album reach large masses, let me become an acclaimed celebrity, let me earn good amount of money in good places. May my relationship with M last for a lifetime, let him love me to death. May his eyes not see anyone but me, let be my lifetime husband. And this one is really interesting, that this intimacy between God and the pilgrim. My Allah, I'm again in front of your gate. Till today you have never sent me back empty-handed. Thank you, my Allah. Please show the proper way to my husband. Keep him away from women, alcohol and drugs. Send me a miracle. May my husband never desire to see G's face or hear her voice again. May he hate that woman and turn my husband's mind and heart and face to me. And may this bitch disappear. Yes, he used the term bitch, like in Turkish, yes. He used this term, really, it was unbelievable, that this intimacy, because there's no clergy involved, only, and they never imagined that one day, and then the crazy anthropologists would find their. And another one again, love affairs. May he apologize be for what he did to her. Let him understand his fault. Someone's heart is broken in a way, and they want, And lütfen Allah'ım, let me get married to G very soon. May he be always in love with me. Let me do PhD and act in popular TV series. Health, happiness, peace, and good income to all my children, and so on. And the style, I was very impressed with the style, because they used the imperative form of Turkish, vermek, like to give us. Like kuluna para ver, hayırlı rızık ver. Allah'ım evinin içindekilere güven ver, bol para ver, rızık ver. Kız kardeşimin oğluna sağlık ver. Like similarly in Romanian also you use like ajută, Doamne, dăm sănătate. Like imperatives you use in a way, so just to show the strength of your desire to God. And they also, the wording is also, they use frequently nasib etmek is nasib is an Arabic term used in many languages, in Islamic, nasib in Arabic as well, nasibi, you know this maybe, including Persian and Turkish, which means destiny or fate. Thus nasibet roughly be translated as to predestinate or ordain. Like Allah'ım sen bize sağlık, mutluluk nasip et, güzel okul kazanayım, güzel bölüm, bize uzun ömür nasip et, tüm sevdiklerime. Yes, and they finish these prayers, they put their prayers, and then the vernacular practices still continues in the backyard. Like they carve their wishes on the walls, like aşk, for example, love, money, and happiness, etc. A villa in Antalya, for example, evlilik, marriage, and they stick coins on the rocks. It's sort of a dual contract between God. If this coin sticks, my praise will be accepted. Sort of a game. And they sketch, make some sketches with the woods and the apples, whatever they find, just to embody their wishes. And the sugar cubes, I told you before, it was just a sort of a votive donation. They bring, if their wishes are granted, they bring sugar cubes and candies to announce that to other fellow pilgrims that their wishes were accepted by God. And the leftovers, they write their wishes. Like tıp in Turkish, it means medicine. So this young girl wants to enter the medicine faculty. Yes, so we finished the liminal part and we are in the post-liminal part. So it's a reintegration. So they reintegrate the society, their social structure again with a new self, but it happens through food ways in a way, by eating. So because according to Pierre Bourdieu in his book Distinction, the tastes, all type of tastes like food, music or whatever, sort of creates a distinction from one social class to another. And it can be used like a social weapon, which marks the good from bad and the low from high, etc. So here the communitas, the concept of communitas, dissolves in a way through food. Mostly they bring their own food. They have a picnic and potluck. together, but the ones who can afford, there is a very fancy restaurant behind the church. They just enjoy the food of the restaurant with wine and other delicious stuff, and they post on Instagram as well. So they go back to their social structures, rich to the rich, poor to the poor, or average to average anyway. Yes, like in every folk events, there are contested arenas. Like here, I just found out 3 different contested issues, like evangelism against orthodoxy, sacred waste, and animal rights defenders. Evangelicals, the pilgrimage of Aya Yorgi goes beyond this scope and turns into a sort of a festival, a carnivalesque event with the street performances of the evangelicals. And because it's a Christian space and time, the evangelists, they find a matchless opportunity to contact with people away from suspicious gaze, because proselytism in Turkey has always been perceived as a threat to the state and also to the nation. And they distribute Bibles and flyers and booklets, but they also use puppet shows, music, concerts, just to, they say, to evangelize the gospel of Jesus. But in evangelism is a bit different, it's than orthodoxy, because there's no room for saint veneration. I mean, it's futile to ask things from dead people. The only salvation is through Jesus, happens through Jesus. So, but one day in 2016, I suppose, yes, and I was just in front of the church, and an evangelical boy was just calling out loudly, reading a verse from Bible. I didn't understand in the beginning what verse he was reading, but then I asked and found out, so it's a very critical verse, which sort of criticized the church's position in this pilgrimage. It's sort of blaming the church that they are taking advantage, a material or financial advantage of the pilgrimage. Like then Jesus entered the temple courts and drove out all who were buying and selling there. He overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those selling doves. He said to them, the scriptures declare, my temple will be called a house of prayer, but you have turned into a den of thieves. So it was a sort of direct attack towards the Orthodox Church or the priest or whatever, and then the Orthodox priest, because normally they are invisible on the pilgrimage day, that's why the pilgrims feel so comfortable in expression. But all of a sudden he just appeared and he just shouted at this evangelical boy just to, and he expelled him from there and asked him not to scare the people with their absurd narratives. And sacred waste, what is sacred waste? All these rags and strings and sugar cubes and candles, so they are charged with emotional value, religious value one hand, but they are also, in the end of the day, sort of a waste, a leftover that should be cleared and cleaned. So what Büyükada Forestry Operation Directorate is always at present on the pilgrimage day. They just watch the behaviors of the pilgrims, because they are very endemic pine trees, and those strings and everything, they can harm the branches of the trees. But one day there happened to be a blockage on the benches, and a man from the directorate intervened with a special scissor just to cut the blockage. But it created such a frustration among the pilgrims, and they attacked the man, the woman. It was like panthers they were, and they attacked them, really. And they said that, like this, what he said was extremely important for me. Imagine that I forcefully poured wine in your mouth when you are fasting in Ramadan. What you are doing is the same. Respect us. You are committing a big sin. So she was just accuting this vernacular practice with an official one, in a way. And don't take phaetons. Horses are dying. In 1984, Büyükada, all islands were declared to be a protected area. So the motor vehicle cars are prohibited to enter the islands, and the phaetons, the horse carriages, become the only means of transportation, and also the nostalgic symbol and the touristic symbol of the island. And after 2000, it became a the massive business, like hundreds of drivers and men are working in this building. But the animal rights defenders, they accuse the faytoncular, the ones who are doing this business, accuse them of torturing the animals by running them for long hours, not giving them enough food or lack of veterinary check, etc. And considering the big number of pilgrims on the pilgrimage day, these protesters, they come to the island and they protest the ones who are taking the horse carriages, like don't take the faytons because the horses are dying. And this creates a sort of a conflict, a very brutal conflict between the men in this business and the activists. And with my own eyes, I saw that one of these activists were beaten severely by the man who was driving this horse carriage. And priests and muftis. So what about the clergy? Where is the clergy here? So they're almost invisible. And I believe that the clergy, they just sort of scared to take a position which is away from the public sentiments, in order not to jeopardize their relation with the public. So they are just mostly muted and they don't make any comments on this issue, this shared pilgrimages. But when you talk to them face to face, like I talked to the Mufti of Büyükada, like 5 minutes, only 10 minutes, something, but he said, okay, it's nice, but all these women, they're corrupted Muslims and they need a good Islamic education. So in a way, he reveals his real intentions. And the priest as well. When I talk to them in face to face, they always correct me. Whenever I use the term shared sacred site or a shared place, no, it's not a shared place. This is an Orthodox church, and the people who come here, they know that it's an Orthodox church. So, yeah, in a way, they were sort of muted, and they don't want to take any extremist position. And what happens in Büyükada, the secular women resist the Muslim authorities, the disciplining power of Muslim authorities, teaching them what is good and bad, what is orthodox, what is not orthodox, what is acceptable, what is not, and they sort of cherish a greater sense of freedom of expression, of religiosity in a church, on Büyükada, in Aya Yorgi, away from the judgmental male gaze. And unlike the other pilgrimages in Europe, like Lourdes and Fatima, and even Aya Paraschiva in Iași, where the whole process is under the control of ecclesiastical authorities, and there's no sharing between Christians and Muslims, there's no sharing. But in Büyükada, we see that the pilgrimage is less controlled by the church, almost not controlled at all. Everything happens very spontaneously with the pilgrims. I mean, they create the whole pilgrimage by themselves. And we don't see a strict form of communitas, like this eternal feeling of comradeship or sisterhood or brotherhood. Yes, the Christians and Muslims or seculars, rich and poor or whatever, they just coexist for a while. Yes, that's true. But they don't really mix into each other just to be called as communitas, like the big sense of comradeship. And what happens concerning the ritual practices, I prefer to use temporal syncretism. Yes, the elements of Islam and vernacular religion and Christianity, they meet for a very short time again, but they also don't mingle into each other, melt into each other to create a new form of religiosity or syncretic religion. But I call this, when I look back now, I remember such a picture from Büyükada. So it's like a bricolage, where the pattern is not interwoven, but constructed with randomly assembled things. So I end my words here. But if you are interested in St. George practices the St. George cult of St. George in Turkey and in Lebanon and Palestine or in Israel and Edirne and in Athens. My PhD dissertation has been published. So if you're just interested, not bored, you can refer to it. Now I will just show you a short video which was shot by a videographer and the anthropologist friend of mine, Manuel Penico, in 2014. I was with him when he was shooting this video. Yes, let's watch it together.
Aslında bir nevi insanın kendini dinlemesi gibi bir şey oldu buraya çıkış. Yani hani o konuşmama olayı benim fikrimce insanın kendini dinlemesi için bir süreç. Ve aslında bence bazen insanların kendini dinlemesi için böyle tuhaf şeyler yapması gerekiyor diye düşünüyorum.
Only in the Feast of St. George, we have an average of 70,000 in one day. That's special day, it's beyond imagination. And sometimes the people have to wait 2 or 3 hours. Not something simple to just come and enter the Church of St. George. Are not Christians. They light candle, and when they find themselves in the church, they didn't plan to come and pray here, but they do kind of pray or wish something. And we hear things that sometimes are very simple, like may God help my children to pass the exams at the university, until very serious things like to heal my child, which has cancer, or sometimes children ask from their parents to quit drinking or to come together because they're separated. They certainly know where they go, but it's a Christian church and it's a place of God. That's what they know. Many of them know also, as well, that it is a Church of St. George. In the church, everything is shared. There's nothing special for one person. Everything is shared.
Orada bilmiyorum, ilk defa girdim, eşeğe gene el açıp Allah'a dua ederek açıktır. Yani her şeyi Allah'tan yani istiyoruz gereken. Düşündük biz gereken, çünkü Hristiyanlar da camilerimizi biliyorsun ziyaret ediyorlar. Biz de niye dedik hani gelmeyelim, ziyaret etmeyelim. Bu düşünceyle geldik.
Karşılık istediğin yine mesela örneğin geliyorum. Evet, bilmem ne, okul. Bu üniversite sınav için ve bu da evlilik.
Şuna inanıyorum, sonuçta burası Allah'ın evi. Yani cami, kilise, hiçbir şey fark etmiyor. Benim bütün isteklerim oldu. Ama burada bir sinerji oluşuyor. Daha çok oluyor herhalde.
Mulțumesc frumos! Any questions? Anything? Yes.
Thank you for this fantastic thing. I might ask something at the end.
Yes, it would be.
I think there's a similar, well, much less restricted, but meaningful tradition in a church in Montenegro. My friends there told me that there's also Muslim people attending a pilgrimage, which happens sometimes in July, if I remember correctly. I can't remember which saint.
Yeah. Maybe St. John or some. No, in July maybe.
The last.
No, it's June is St. John, right? Okay. It would be interesting. I will check for it as well.
If it was July, I'm not confusing it with May, but they said it's on a very high
Yeah.
and then all the people that come there, they decide to walk sometimes barefoot, sometimes on their knees.
That's the importance of the landscape. Being the hill is very important.
And then there's also
Yeah, that's interesting.
and it's very close to actually getting
In Montenegro, you said.
Yes.
Okay, that would be interesting to find out. Okay.
I wasn't aware that something similar happens.
Yeah, in many places in the world, especially in this Balkan and then the Middle East, Lebanon as well. And Marsharbil is everybody is just mixing in Lebanon. Yes, because yeah, it is.
I knew that somewhere it's near, right?
Virgin Mary is also, but it's most not like a pilgrimage, but sort of votive visits, like not in a collective pilgrimage, Virgin Mary, but like votive visits, daily visits or something like this. Okay.
It's on a plane, I think.
Sarısaltık maybe?
No.
No?
It's not that sounds like a Turkish.
No, Sarısaltık is also venerated, like they say that it's San Dimitrius. The Christians say that it's San Dimitrius in the Balkans, in the Albania as well, for example. And the Muslims claim that no, it's Sarısaltık, so it's sort of, there's also a shared pilgrimage there. But Karadağ, maybe Albania and Karadağ, they're not far from, Karadağ is Montenegro, I was saying, in Turkey. Yeah.
I can ask.
Okay. Thank you.
I just have several questions.
Several.
Whose art is found here at the Americans
Who is the icon? The St. George, the icon of St. George, yes.
And it wasn't St. George, it's the same version of the church. It is pilgrims come still.
You mean the saint, is it some symbolic value in it? No, definitely not. In Lebanon, yes, in St. George and Khidr, they are sort of associated with each other, and the Muslims venerate St. George as well. But in Istanbul, in Anatolian cases, they have almost no information and no connection with these two saints. So if it was something, but in Vefa church, for example, in Istanbul, another church, there's also a very small-scale collective pilgrimage as well, and it's dedicated to Virgin Mary, for example. So maybe it would have happened if it was another dedicated to another saint. Yes, there is. I told you the Vefa church in Istanbul. There's a very similar one, but a very but they mostly go to this church on the feast day just to take the ayazma, the water, the holy water. But they don't practice this type of ritual dramas or nothing. For Vefa, yes, it's the only reason, holy water. Conclusions about? But I'm just a simple pilgrim now. I haven't started this research process, so let me just answer this question after finishing the research. Then I'm just a simple pilgrim, a curious and also a believer in a way. I'm a Muslim by origin, my history and ethnicity in a way. Yes, but I sort of feel this serenity and this strange feeling. So that's why every year I just want to take the flight and go to Yash, and yeah, that's not only with academic purposes, but also with personal motivations, spiritual motivations. If you ask this. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Could you tell us, please, how you do this research? And what is your next project?
Next. Okay, it took me but it's a PhD research. Like I wrote my PhD on this, but not only Aya Yorgi, but it was a comparative study between Lebanon and Istanbul, but there were also other secondary fields like Palestine, Edirne, and Athens as well. So it took me 4 years. Yes, almost 4 years, 3.5. And my next destination, or what you said, next? My next project will be definitely about Sfânta Parasceva in Iași, yes, definitely. Yeah, the relic itself is the object. Here there's no relics, no relics, no. But the pilgrims would like it if it was in Turkey, they like to touch, this type of relics, and it would be, yeah.
Santa Parasceva Turkey.
No, I'm the only one. I just keep this position, and yes.
The Lebanese believes that St. George
Khadr is Khadr.
from Lebanon.
No, St. George was born into a Christian family in Cappadocia. He's originally from Turkey, and he died, not Turkey, modern Turkey, okay, that back then, Cappadocia. And he died in Nicomedia. He was decapitated, which is also in Turkey. So Nicomedia is Izmit, in Izmit. So he was from that land. But interestingly, no one has this notion, they don't act with this notion of venerating the saint. It's just something, new religiosities we see here, not the simple or basic saint veneration.
May I ask how the mention that it's also a recognizable saint, let's say, or a sacred person for the Iraqi or part of the Iraqi?
Yes.
How exactly do they?
Because St. George Margevargus is a very prominent saintly figure in all this Levant area, including Lebanon, Palestine, Iraq, and Georgia, then to Greece and the Balkans as well. And also, of course, in Istanbul, among the rooms of Istanbul.
All the way to Iraq.
Of course, yes, it's fascinating. But also in Egypt, St. George Margirgi's church was bombed 3 years ago by ISIS in Alexandria, around Alexandria or some Copt, yes, the Copt church it was, but it's also dedicated. But in Ethiopia, even in Ethiopia, because St. George, Kaddis Girgis, they say, is the patron saint of Ethiopia. So even to Eritrea, it's such a big geography is prevailing. Yeah. Mulțumesc frumos.